Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make your magazine stand out and improve your text layouts in the Clip Studio Tips of the Month. Let's begin. So let's start with some brainstorming. It's useful to write down keywords that describe the feeling you want to communicate. The keywords are just words to help you visualize the concept. You don't necessarily have to use them in the title or other parts of the cover. They are symbolic. Then select the main image. It's of course very important, as the rest of the cover will be designed to emphasize and guide the viewer's gaze. And then the color palette that complements the main image and evokes a particular feeling in viewers. Now let's decide on the format of our magazine. This is another important basic step that will begin to give us limits. In this scenario, the limits are important because we are going to use them as a guide for the viewer, and they will also guide us to the production process. Click on the File menu and select New. If you click on the small drop-down menu, you can select a format. When you click on a format, you will also see numbers indicating the width and height, changing accordingly. You can also click on the drop-down menu unit and select your preferred unit of measurement. In this case, I chose the B5 format, which is suitable for the type of magazine I want to create, with travel, art and architecture as the topic. However, if you want to create a fashion magazine, for example, you may prefer to choose an A4 format. The first thing we need to do is activate the grid by selecting View, Grid from the menu. Also make sure that the ruler bar is active in the View menu. By clicking and dragging on the ruler bars at the top and on the left of the canvas, we can set lines that act as rulers. It is important to set these rulers because they will constitute our grid. The concept of the grid is fundamental to graphic design, but even though there are fixed type of grid, such as the rule of thirds or the isometric grid, designers ultimately break those rules to find a new balance that is innovative without losing the concept of composition. In other words, it's good to learn the basics, but ultimately you want to learn how to break these rules and create your own grid to produce a composition that feels planned yet not boring. In this example, I first created a standard grid to define the edges of the frame, as I wanted to achieve a frame picture effect. Having looked at the picture, then I decided to cut the page in half and enlarge the bottom section slightly to emphasize the reflection. Finally, I experimented with the frame, reducing the thickness of its two parts proportionally to create a more interesting effect. Remember that it is okay to break the rule, but do so in a way that serves your purpose, which is to communicate your intention. Another thing to consider is the concept of load. Basically, we want to position the load in the lower part of the cover. In other words, anything that creates the impression of weight, such as a banner, a darker color, or in this case, the enlarged section, should be at the bottom. The top part of the cover is generally the most important and is where the title or name of the magazine is. If you put an effect or object that gives the impression of weight on the top section, it will look unbalanced. Another important concept in magazine cover design is hierarchy. In other words, every element you put on the cover will be seen by the viewer in a certain order, and you want to control this. In this case, the viewer's attention is immediately drawn to the title. It is bold with a clean font that's easy to read. It has a warm white color that is very noticeable among the other colors in the palette. It plays with the picture, creating a 3D effect because it's behind the picture. It also plays with the frame, as it's like an extension of the frame. Then, because of the 3D effect created by the title, the viewer's attention will pass to the picture itself, and then to the second larger text, which in this case is vertical. This particular element breaks the horizontal lines created by the title, the cut in the middle, and the other minor texts on the cover. Finally, the viewer's gaze is free to focus on small details, such as the small circle containing the price information and the other minor texts providing additional information. As you may have noticed, when designing a cover, there is a grid and many elements that can be moved around. All of these things can be visually overwhelming, which is why you need to go to the Window menu and click on Navigator. The Navigator allows you to see the bigger picture by providing a clean overview without showing the grid. Make sure to activate it, but also to enlarge the small navigator window to check the final result in real time. Once our design is set, we can start working on the text. To add text to your cover, click on the A symbol in the tool window. Then click on the canvas and start typing. You can adjust the position and other characteristics of the text later, after selecting it. To change the text preferences, go to the Tool Property window, where you will find characteristics that can be modified. To personalize further, click on the wrench icon at the bottom right corner of the tool property window. When you click on the font option, a drop-down menu will appear. If you look closely at the bottom, you will see a button with a plus icon labeled Add Fonts from Files. Clicking on it will allow you to add new fonts. How can we evaluate usability of a font? Let's start by looking at the difference between serif and sans serif fonts. As I showed you previously, you can access the Subtool Detail window by clicking on the wrench icon. There are some very useful features in this window. If you click on Font and Line Space Alignment, you will find the options Character Spacing and Line Space. Those two parameters allow you to adjust the spacing between letters and the vertical spacing between words. Furthermore, if you click on Outline, you can create a word with holofonts. Near every option there is a small square. If you click on the square, an eye icon will appear. This makes the corresponding effect appear in the tool property menu for easier access. I'd like to show you two more useful effects. The first is the border effect, which you can find in the layer property window. If you click on it, you can add a border to your font and choose a color and thickness in the same window. However, if you right-click on the font layer to which you have added a border and select Rasterize, the border will remain permanently. You can then apply another border by clicking on Border Effect again, and you can repeat this process to create your desired effect. The second effect is the circular text. After writing your text, select it and click on Circular Text in the tool property window. If you can't see it there, look for it in Subtool Detail window. As you can see, the text is now circular, and you can adjust the radius using the parameter in the window. Remember that you can always treat a text as a normal image once you have rasterized it. This means you can draw on the text, modify it as you like, and create logos or change its form with the Liquify tool. The only limit is your imagination. We have already seen how the concept of hierarchy is applied in the design of the cover. This concept also applies to the layout of text. You can create a hierarchy by using different methods to differentiate between words. For example, you can use different dimensions for the characters or apply bold or different colors. This is a means of communicating your intention. So ask yourself, what feeling do I want my viewers to experience when they look at my cover? So take a look at this picture. In this case, as the magazine is about fashion, I wanted to convey a modern, clean look with an artistic touch. To achieve this, I decided to create a contrast by using a serif font for the magazine title and a clean sans serif font for the other text. I also experimented with the title, arranging it vertically and creating the color change effect that you can see. In the phrase at the top of the cover, I used different sizes of the Iragino Sans font and did the same in the list at the bottom to create a sense of hierarchy. The result is that the viewer's gaze are guided through the cover, first looking at the bolder texts and then the subtler ones. The contrast effect and the way the same font is used in different ways aim to create interest and avoid boredom. As I have already mentioned, creating a grid helps you to put everything in the right place, and the same grid can help you to visualize where to place text. However, as well as creating a sense of order, finding the right dimensions and spacing gives texts a sense of consistency. Let's take a look at this picture. As you can see, there are texts of different sizes. To create a consistent look, once you have chosen a size for your first text, use multiples of that size to generate larger or smaller text. Here, I've also experimented with the contrast between the title written in alphabet letters and the other text written in Japanese. I also took advantage of the fact that the Japanese can be written vertically to create a contrast between the horizontal text and the vertical text, which acts as a hook to guide the viewer's gaze to the important information he wants to convey. Additionally, the vertical text is larger and I created a shadow effect to make it stand out. We have seen that choosing the right layout and font for your text helps guide the viewer's gaze. It can also allow us to create a particular atmosphere. For example, the cover of a fashion magazine is clean and captivating, while a magazine about travel and architecture evokes a sense of curiosity and exoticism. In this example, the cover is a completely different topic. The purpose of a children's magazine is to catch the attention of both children and parents, so the image is very important. The bold, playful circle title surrounds the moon, and all these details grab the children's attention. The information at the bottom is placed so as not to interfere with the rest of the cover, but it's important for parents because it highlights the fact that the magazine contains 100 stories. However, the placement and layout of the word classic helps maintain the playful feel. Another important aspect is the amount of information displayed. We don't want to overload the viewer with text on the cover, as the magazine is intended for children. Another important concept is the void space. This concept originates from Japanese art, but has also been adopted in design. Leaving a space empty can be powerful, creating two effects. Firstly, the viewer's eyes have more room to breathe. Secondly, the other elements on the cover are emphasized. Balancing the void space with the other elements can be tricky, but it's something you should consider when designing your cover. Treat the void space as an element itself, and refining your ability to incorporate it into your design can really elevate the final result. In this example, the main image is positioned slightly lower to allow more space for the sky, and the empty space on the top left contrasts with the title on the right. In the second example, the white space behind the model creates the impression of a photographic set. The absence of a background also allows the viewer's eyes to focus on the other elements, contributing to the clean aesthetic. The last thing to consider when creating a magazine is how to achieve a sense of depth. One method is to experiment with layers by placing text behind or on top of an image. This can be done by simply moving the layer containing the text up or down in the layer window. Another method is to go to Filter, Menu, and select Blur, Gaussian Blur, to apply a blur effect to an image. This creates a sense of depth and can be used for images intending to be close to the viewer, as well as for blurring backgrounds behind the subject to highlight them. Take a look at this picture. As you can see, the title is behind a hill and a group of leaves in the foreground are blurred. I also created an overlapped effect for the title, using the S in seasons as the initial letter for summer. I highlighted two pieces of text, one by applying a white background, and you can do this in the Subtool Detail window by selecting text and checking the background color box. And secondly, I created a circle with the figure tool for the other text. Remember that you can always write text by hand. In this case, I used the marker tool. A quick tip is to activate the border effect in the Layer Properties window so that the border appears as you write. We have seen how combining appropriate text layouts with images can be really effective in capturing the attention of viewers, sparking their curiosity and conveying a particular mood. Why don't you try making your own magazine? Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.